Well, thank you everyone for being with us today. And right now I am up in North Maine, near Portland, Maine. And this is our summer camper that we come to now and then. And we're about a mile from the ocean. We just love this sort of this camping. I mean, this is luxury. This isn't like camping in a tent. but it is for technology, it's a little bit limited. So thank you in advance for just accepting everything as it is. I think we have a backup plan with Jenny. And Jenny, thank you for being our co-host today. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here. And I look forward to getting into chapter 12 and 13 of John Klein's book. It's just really got some really important content in it. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about it, Jenny. And thank you for bringing forward that question from last week. The mic is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So we'll start there with that question. So
Good.
Understanding that you are not the body mind, I think the first thing is to understand it from the point of view of the mind, to understand it intellectually, because if you're not clear about it intellectually, if the mind's always coming up with objections, then it's going to be a problem. Well, feeling it is going to be a problem, because we don't want to rely on belief. We want to know it for ourselves. So I think the starting point is always to investigate what you really are, and to start that investigation by saying, well, what is it that's absolutely essential to me, that's been with me all my life, as long as I can remember, that was with me from when I was a tiny child, when I was growing up through my teenage years, when I was busy learning, busy out at work, and right up to now. What is that? And because it's only something that's absolutely permanent, that you could say is essential to you. If you feel that you are the body, then imagine, I mean, it's a horrid thing to imagine, but just imagine that for some reason you had to have your arm amputated. Would that make you any less? Would that make you any smaller? I think you can see that it wouldn't. So that's another way of looking at it intellectually. Sometimes people feel that it's not so much that they are their body, but that they are their mind. And I think one of the best ways to tackle this is to see that your mind is always changing. There's a constant flow of sensations and perceptions and thoughts which are going through your mind all the time. And something that is changing all the time can't be you. But also see there are times when your mind is not there. So the very obvious times are when you go into deep sleep at night, but there are also lots of times during the day, and that actually comes into this chapter, so we'll deal with that a little bit later, when the mind is absent, as in the space between two thoughts or perceptions or sensations. There's no mind there. So mind comes and goes. And something that comes and goes really can't be you. And yeah, I think that's probably the best way of seeing, first of all, intellectually, that you're not your body and not your mind. Now, as far as feeling that is concerned, that takes quite a bit longer. And in my experience, what really works is every time your mind is no longer required by what you're doing in the world, that you have a kind of pause, and there's a pause between activities, there's a pause between thoughts. Often there's a pause when you're not, you can't do anything. Perhaps you're waiting for a train or something, you really can't do anything. So in all of those times, if you just sink back into what you now know intellectually that you are, so you know that you are pure awareness, that you are not your body mind, it's just that at the moment you're not feeling it. You just sink back into that. The more time you spend doing that, the sooner you will start to feel that the rest of the time. And it does take a while. It might take 6 months, might take a year or so, but it does work eventually. So I think that's probably the best advice I can give. On top of that, of course, there are the yoga meditations. There are some that are free. Rupert's yoga meditations are on a separate channel on YouTube, so you can find them there. At the moment, Transparent Body Luminous World is not available in the UK and Europe. I'm not sure whether it's still available in the US, but Rupert has said that he's going to try and make it available as soon as he can. So hopefully that will come back at some point. And those are very good for really exploring the body and the feelings in the body, and that will help too. So I hope that that has dealt with that particular question, and that the questioner will be satisfied with that. But if they're on Facebook and they want to ask any more questions, then go ahead, and there's lots of us that can answer those.
Yes, thank you. That was Tatiana's this afternoon, or this evening. I think Tatiana, you're in UK also, so this is early evening for you all. But she's
Yes.
here with us. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that explanation. And it's so fitting that explanation came with this week's chapter, because it absolutely does speak to that also in this chapter 12.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So Jenny, just in case something occurs on the internet, I'm just going to pass over the host baton to you, just so that, because as the host, I think you will be more of the primary state of the recording and the internet experience instead of me. So I think everyone's experience will be more primary and dedicated to your bandwidth. So I just passed that over to you.
Okay, that's fine. Do I need to do anything my end, or you just do it all your end?
No, I've done it all. It's all done.
You've done it all. That's
yeah.
Okay. That's great.
Thank you.
Well, shall we go on to the first chapter, chapter 12?
Yes.
Then perhaps. So each of the chapters in this book starts with a contemplation, which is really it's like Rupert's meditations. Like he starts most of the meetings with a meditation. So Jean Klein does the same, and in this chapter, the contemplation is quite long. It's quite a large proportion of the chapter, but it contains so much. And it's really great, because what he's doing is he's describing what it's like to not just to understand our true nature, but really to live that. And he's describing it from all sorts of aspects of life, what life is like when you are abiding within that understanding. And in doing that, he's giving us clues as to how to find that understanding that he's experiencing, how to get to the same place. Yeah. Place.
Yes.
That's what
This whole first overview is more of a commentary from Jean Klein. It's not related to a question. It's sort of it's the front end of this of the discussion that comes later. But to me, there's a lot of really good content in these first 3 pages.
There is. It's absolutely tremendous, really. So that his description really revolves around recognizing that we can't know ourselves as an object. The way the mind works is to superimpose concepts on everything it experiences, everything it thinks about, and that involves conceptualizing objects. So, for example, when we hear Rupert say that self-inquiry leads to the understanding I am pure consciousness, we tend to conceptualize consciousness as an object. We go and start looking for it, or trying to be it, or trying to be in it, or talking about being in it. But all of that is objectivizing it. And I'll just read what Jean Klein says. He says, all striving to objectify the knower, which cannot be conceived of in terms of concepts, prevents us from directly perceiving our true nature, which is being, non-dual knowledge. So that objectifying is just the natural way the mind works. We're not going to stop the mind working that way, because that's what it does. But really all we need to do is to notice that, to recognize that's how it works. So at the bottom of page 93, he says, trying not to conceptualize is also a concept and a violence against existence. And that's such a strong word, isn't it, Bill? Violence.
I had to look at a couple of times when I saw the use of that word violence.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
But isn't that interesting? I also, going back a couple of sentences, he says, when we talk of birth, we mean the birth of the ego, of
Yes, exactly. Birth and death relate to the separate self that we imagine ourselves to be. So
yes, that brings it much closer.
yes, it does. So you can really think of the Vedantic path as consisting of a number of different approaches to getting the mind to go beyond the mind, beyond objectifying things, beyond conceptualizing things. And what he gives us in this chapter is a number of different approaches. So starting with the first one, I think that's on page 91 maybe, when he says, when a desire arises, notice it, but don't follow it to its conclusion in words or in an object. So you just let it flow through and let the energy subside. And that was interesting, because it's different from what Rupert, the way Rupert teaches it. For me, what Jean Klein is saying is something that happens automatically after you've understood and been following this teaching for a while. But I'm not sure how you could actually see it as something you could practice. What Rupert suggests, or what he talks about, is personal and impersonal desire, and that feels to me a lot simpler. His method is basically recognize whether, when a desire arises, whether it's a personal desire or an impersonal desire. And a personal desire is a desire that goes towards happiness. goes towards it, because happiness is what you want, and you think that whatever it is that you desire will give you that happiness. But an impersonal desire comes from happiness. It's about sharing your happiness, or celebrating your happiness in some way. So if you see a personal desire arising, then all you need to do is to remember that objects are never going to bring you happiness. And then it's very easy to let it go. And I think we've all seen that objects don't bring us happiness. So I don't think that's so hard um, to do that particular approach.
Yes, yes.
But
It's
it's a,
interesting. The language that is the key sort of to that is when Jean Klein or Rupert says to don't get involved in the experience involved. You
yeah,
can be drawn in, making your eye as the experience.
yes, don't get lost in
Yes,
experience. Absolutely. So the second approach he talks about, he says, life reveals itself when we see that our habitual living is a compensation, and that's on page 92. And compensation is an interesting word. He uses that quite a lot. And what he really means by it is the endless search for happiness in objects to fill that very deep sense of lack, which is at the core of the separate self. So that's what he means by compensation. You're compensating for that sense of lack by some object or other. And he's saying that our habitual living is constantly trying to find
yes,
objects to make us happy.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So, so
yes,
it's important to see that, to notice that, but to see underneath it in a way, and then that's real living. You go beyond the words and you really feel that. And he talks about
yes,
living in not knowing, and just allowing life to happen as it's going to happen, and live in not
yes,
knowing.
yes. And when he says real life is beyond life and death, we actually have an understanding that makes this statement true for us.
Yes.
That real life, it's the experience where uh, it, this relaxed knowing just becomes a more peaceful and a more consistent way of being, and it makes it possible that we can be happy in all circumstances.
Yes, and if we are thinking of life and death, then we are thinking of past and future. So it's really tied in with living in the now, living in the present moment.
Yes, yes. He gives a great description the of understanding living in the now later on in this chapter, I think.
Yes, yes. So he's also talking about everything points towards awareness and is reintegrated in it when we live in that way. And again, I think that perhaps needs a little bit of explanation, and the explanation really comes very nicely from Rupert's teaching. Rupert talks about beauty, and when you see an object which you feel is beautiful, then you just notice that that there's a dissolving, that there's a union that takes place, that feeling of being separate is just collapses. It collapses in beauty. Obviously, not all objects are beautiful, and you can. So that's something that just happens. That's spontaneous, and it happens if you're in surroundings where there is beauty. But you can deliberately use techniques from the yoga meditations, like you can take any object that's around you and say, see that all I know of that table is the sight of it. All I know of the sight of it is seeing. All I know of seeing is just the knowing of it. And all I know of knowing is myself, is awareness, and that takes you from the object, and takes you from the object to yourself. So that's one way of using using what Jean Klein is saying here.
Yes, I like that description. That sort of a practice is very helpful, so that you don't step into duality and make something good and something bad, or something beautiful and something not beautiful, but it gives you an unattached experience of the object without attaching a meaning or a label or a duality to it.
Yes, exactly. It's an impersonal experiencing of that object. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
And then he also talks about direct intuition, the understanding that's beyond words, and explains that shows us the way out of habitual striving for enlightenment. And he contrasts that with the idea of trying to find the self through thinking that goes round and round and round, and never really gets there, because you never can find yourself as an object, and thinking is always going to involve objects. So
Yes.
that's and again, it's just noticing that's important, not needing to do anything, but just noticing, and noticing if you're getting tied up in these thoughts that go round and round. Then he, what else? Yes, he talks about harmony, and that it depends on the establishment in the self, in which mind, spirit, and body are united in harmony. And I think what he's talking about here is really the relaxation, that when the mind is relaxed and the body is relaxed, and there's just a feeling of relaxation, of attention isn't going anywhere, it's just resting in its source, and that is a place of harmony.
It's interesting for my experience, Jenny, and for everyone, that the more understanding that I have of these ideas, the easier and the more often that I rest in that place of being. And it's an experience that is timeless, and it's also it is peaceful, and it does. I could stay right there.
Yes, exactly. And it really goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that you need to find a way of settling the mind's questions first, but you don't let the mind go round and round and round in circles. You just find a solution, you find a way of settling the mind's questions, then you can just relax, and it's very
Yes.
nice.
Yes. Very nice.
Yes. There's an important part. I'll just read this paragraph because I think it is important. Generally, what we call being conscious in our daily life is a pale reflection of the self. The essential nature of the self, presence, shines forth in the void between two thoughts, two feelings, and two states. Generally, we ignore the void as an absence of objects, a loss of consciousness. But eventually, we will become conscious of it, even in the presence of objects. And what he's pointing to here is that it's often very much easier, and Rupert says this too, to really experience what we mean by the self, by consciousness, in the absence of objects, because the absence of objects means the absence of mind. So if mind is not there, there's nothing to conceptualize anything. So it is easier because, as he says, that experience just shines through.
Yes. Yes. There's
So
an interesting, there's an interesting sort of a aha moment that I had from this content that we're reading right here, and that is that when we're speaking about being conscious and objects of experience, and for many of us, and many of us that are even in this book study, we read A Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles uses relationships as a means of healing or of undoing the experiences that we have in our own mind, our own beliefs and memories. And in my mind, the way the direct path uses the same teaching, it doesn't call it relationships, it calls it objects. The objects of experience are any kind of relationships that we have. So an object of experience is my wife, my kids, this other person over here, my dog. These are still all objects of experience. And so the translation is relationships are really objects of experience.
yes, and objects of experience. Well, it has such a broad meaning because it includes thoughts as well, but it also includes states of mind and things like a blissful state of mind. That again is an object of experience.
Yes, yes. I just wanted to sort of give a
Yeah,
view that came in as I was reading this material for this book study. All of a sudden that came in as how the teachings actually are so consistent in the understanding. And for me, an object of experience is much clearer for me to put my mind around than a relationship that has a lot of moving parts.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
So there was another paragraph that I thought was important. I'll read this one as well. Stopping ourselves willfully from thinking for a length of time comes from a conceptualized ego and reinforces it. Trying not to conceptualize is also a concept and a violence against existence. Objectifying hinders us, stops us from finding the way to what we really are. So it's all about dropping all striving. Stop trying to get rid of agitation, not fighting it. and that it's about acceptance, surrender, and relaxation. Yeah. He
Yes,
says, listen to agitation as a whole, and if you do that, then Rupert's method, you see it as a sensation in the body, and you just allow it to be there. It's not myself. You just allow it to soak in the
yes,
warm bath of awareness, and it's it's not a problem. So there's no need to stop it. Try to stop
yes.
it. Mm.
Henrik, I think we're on the middle of page 94.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, I haven't been giving page numbers for people who are are following it.
That's okay. That's what
Yes,
two of us
yes.
are for.
Right.
Yeah.
So going on to something on page 95,
Okay.
where he says emotional and physical experiences are no more than states which come and go. Often we confuse non-dual experience with these states. We think the non-dual experience requires a quiet mind, but no, it doesn't.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just requires clear seeing, and that's all. Realities beyond subject and object.
Yes. Yes. I found it interesting at the top of this paragraph right here on page 95, just under the question that says, what place does grace have in non-duality? And just under that first sentence caught my attention, but I found that very interesting. The very moment we obtain a greatly desired object, the ego is extinguished.
Yes, yes.
Isn't
So
that an interesting statement?
it's it's the reason why we spend so much of our lives looking for happiness in objects, desiring objects, because we're going from one desire to another, and we get this little bit of temporary happiness.
Yeah, for
Um,
one moment. And then maybe 5 minutes later or
it's gone.
2 hours later, you're looking for the next thing. so,
Yes,
so
yes.
funny.
It it is, and yes, he goes on a bit later in the next chapter about that, and it reminded me of when I was following the Shankaracharya's teaching, and the Shankaracharya always said, remember Paramatman is the God really in that particular tradition all the time, because if you do that, then that will lead to happiness. So I tried that, and I tried it and tried it and tried it as much as I could. Rupert was following the same teaching, and I'm quite sure that he did exactly the same, but it isn't actually true.
And what is the
Uh,
statement again?
um, remember uh, remember Paramatman all the time. Try to remember Paramatman all the time, because that will lead to happiness. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Because what happens is we conceptualize Paramatman or God
Yes,
as an object, and
yes,
objects don't lead to happiness. And one of the things I realized after I came to Rupert's teaching was why that occurs in so many traditional paths in different forms. I mean, that was just the Shankaracharya's statement of that. But remembering God is very much part of a Christian path. Um, and I think the reason occurred, or reason it originally was put into those progressive paths, is that people do try and try and try, just as I did, and eventually they realize that it's not going to work. And once they realize it's not going to work, then they're ready for the teaching of the direct path. And all the direct path is the highest level of teaching of all genuine paths. All the progressive paths, the real ones, have something equivalent to the direct path at their very highest level. So that's how a teacher knows when a student is ready for the direct path. Anyway, that's my feeling about it.
Yeah, well, thank you for adding that, and also including that little bit of objectifying God,
Yes.
objectifying the idea of God. God is a subtle. It's a sense of it's duality. It's not even subtle. It's total, an objectified experience of of being separate.
Yes, yeah, yes, exactly. And often um, people are taught to repeat the names of God as a mantra, or repeat phrases or sentences from a holy book, and to do that all the time to keep the mind occupied. But keeping the mind occupied in that way um, keep, keeps the mind active and alert, and it's the exact opposite. And I think
Yes,
it's really the understanding of that, a really deep understanding that what we're looking for is way beyond the mind. That's
yes,
actually important.
yes,
It
yes,
took it took me years, and I would never, if I'd stayed in that organization, I would never have realized that. It was only after coming to Rufa's teaching that I did.
yes, yes. Same here.
Yeah.
Same.
Yes. So
So
perhaps we should go on to chapter 13, do you think?
yes, we have about 15 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, that's fine then.
It's chapter 13. I titled it "True Knowledge." This has some really good stuff.
Yes, yeah, yes, it does.
Yes.
And it's really mostly about that dividing function of the mind, subject and object, cause and effect, past, present, and future, liking and disliking. So that's one of the themes. There is another theme that comes in later, which is about conflicts in the world, but that the dividing function is really the first the first theme. And he starts by talking about um, silent openness, being open to reality, and then thinking will lose its boundaries and its contents will subside into its source, being knowledge.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
that openness, that not judging, I feel is so important.
Yes. Yes. It's that openness brings communication. It brings uh, uh, that openness is just that space where you're uninvolved, and it seems to be that space where divine intelligence drops in.
Yes, yes, exactly. The um, understanding lies beyond the mind, between thoughts, as Rupert says. Yeah, but that's only possible with openness, because the opposite of openness is the mind commenting and judging.
Separating.
Yes, separating out.
Yes.
So it's nice relaxed openness, and
Yes.
that
Yes.
takes us a very long way, I think.
Yes.
Mm.
And if you go down to the second paragraph on page 97, Jean Klein says, when an object is recognized as an expression of consciousness, its substance dissolves into knowledge, living, silence, peace, lucidity. And that is what happens. That's the experience, or that's what occurs in that open space that is that reveals itself as awareness.
Yes, yes.
So beautiful.
Yes, it is. Mm.
Yes,
The light is always there before the object appears. I love that.
yes, yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
The descriptions given in these words, it just has such a um, full feeling.
It does. There's so much in every sentence. I mean, it's hard to do justice to these chapters in just an hour session, isn't it? There's so much in
Yes,
every sentence.
yes,
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 yes. He goes on to talk about the appearance of objects being discontinuous. So they come and go, and I think that's important, because when we really feel this, and Rupert talks about feeling understanding. When we really feel this, then automatically consciousness comes into the foreground. Normally, we're so taken with objects, we're focusing on objects all the time. Objects are in the foreground. They're what's on the screen. But when we really feel the coming and going of objects, and the fact that they're continuous, they're not constant, then that seems to, for me anyway, bring that automatic consciousness into the foreground.
yes, yes,
So
yes,
you're really living from that perspective, and Jean Klein says sooner or later you become established in it. That's yeah.
yes,
So if you're living life from that perspective, in other words.
yes. He says, in reality, you are purely the witness of your actions, and you're remaining as the witness, and you're also in all.
Yes, you're just the witness, and he says the confusion invades once you believe yourself to be the doer, the thinker, or the willer. Yeah.
Yes.
And then he
There's a,
goes,
no,
sorry.
you go ahead. I'll pause.
And then he talks about not being able to work on the mind, and that's very much what I was describing with the Shankaracharya's teaching. A lot of that was working on the mind, trying to make the mind different, and there were a number of precepts which we were supposed to be following, which were all to do with controlling the mind, but it's actually none of them worked because you really can't. So we don't, in the direct path, we don't try to control the mind. We just stop struggling and allow attention to sink back into its source, and then the mind itself gradually disappears.
Yes, yes. I like what he talks about on page 98 when he's speaking about what he calls global vision.
Yeah.
And this is what you were just saying. He says that these are aspects. Most of the time, action is only reaction caused by fear, anxiety, and desire. These are aspects of a mind which works like a kaleidoscope, which can only rearrange a fixed number of pieces, a mind sustained by the ego and already known memory. Through global vision, all will, all intention is abandoned, leaving only silent awareness, total presence.
Yes, that's lovely, isn't it? And it doesn't mean that nothing happens. It just means that what happens is not happening on behalf of a believed in separate entity. It's just something that's arising from the universe, from just impersonal action, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, that's very beautiful. And he talks quite a bit about time, and explaining that time is a creation of the mind, and he does that in a number of ways. He says that first, if we really look at our experience of time, then we will see that it's formed out of a succession of thoughts or perceptions. And so we've seen thoughts and perceptions are discontinuous, whereas the awareness within which they arise is continuous. So without that sequence of thoughts or perceptions, you can't really have any time. And that's why in deep sleep, there doesn't seem to be any time, because there's no thought or perception in deep sleep. So time seems to stop. But really, we can see from that time is just a superimposition by the mind, and that's how the mind creates it, by creating it from a set of thoughts or perceptions. So that's one way of looking at time, and the other way, which is a favorite Klein way of looking at time, is through memory. And he says that when we remember something, we're always remembering it in the present moment. That thought is always occurring in the present. It's just, and that thought has no reality other than itself. It's just a thought among many other thoughts. It's not something which refers to anything real. So we can also look at memory. I prefer the first method, but that's probably a personal choice. Either of those really takes you there.
Yes, yes. I like the language that he uses in the very last paragraph on page 99 when he says silent awareness is beyond dispersion and concentration.
Yes.
Yes. Once seen this light, the mind gives up striving and agitation dies away, giving way to living presence.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And he goes on, and I think this is really well, it's something that was very important for me anyway. I'll just read what he says. If we succeed in stopping thoughts by concentration, we nonetheless remain in a state of conflict. When the mind is calmed in this way, we perceive an emptiness, a feeling of quietness, which might mistakenly lead us to believe we had attained the ultimate. It's essential to accept that our true self is never to be found in a perception or in an object. And that was very important for me when I first came to Rupert's teaching, to really understand that, because I had been using mantra meditation for many years, and it had taken me to that complete peace, that awareness without objects, and I had conceptualized that as the ultimate, as what I was looking for and what I wanted
Mm.
all of the time. But he's saying, well, don't be fooled by that.
Yes.
And of course
Yes.
I was, and a lot of people are, I think.
Yeah.
It's
Well, the
very
same
common.
thing goes with the using God.
Yes.
The term God, or when people think that Jesus is the only way, the truth, and the light, or the life, or when you think that the Holy Spirit is the only way, or the Buddha, or any of those symbols, you have to embody what that symbol what that symbol is, and
Yes,
not make it an object.
yes, you need to go beyond the symbol to what it is pointing to, and go beyond that, beyond mind, don't you? To make sense of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Otherwise, you don't have the direct experience.
Yeah.
You don't have the direct knowing, and the being is the being isn't realized.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So then he goes on to talk about conflicts in the world, and this is interesting. The book was originally published, a much earlier edition with a different title, in 1981. So I think the quotes in the book, and all of this was taken from meetings, his meetings. I
Mm-hmm.
suspect they probably came from the 1970s, maybe a bit from the 60s as well. But if you think about what was happening then, there was the Cold War, we still had the Berlin Wall, there was
Yep.
the Vietnam War, there was lots of conflict all around the world. And if you think about it, conflict has, of all kinds, has always existed, and it's not likely to change, and it hasn't changed now. We've got a lot of conflict, we've got a lot of xenophobia around now. So this is something that's always been there. And I liked his description. All the problems of the world are our own problems, born of ego. They come and go like waves, one after the other. Now, he doesn't mean that the problems in the world are the problems of an individual separate self. He's talking about ego in general, I think. But when he's referring to that wave motion, he's saying, that you're not going to stop. You're not going to hold back the waves. You're not King Canute that can stop the waves.
Yes.
It's something that's always going to be there. Um, they so the world problems, they're not unreal, but they have no independent reality. They're not created by our individual minds, but they are just the activity of consciousness itself. They're made out of consciousness. They arise like the waves in the ocean, and we can't change that. He says sociologists and economists who try to eliminate social conflicts inevitably do no more than create new ones. And if we look back in history, we can see that that's absolutely true.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes,
an interesting interesting commentary, that.
yes.
And um, he also compares our view of the world to our view of the body. And if we can see that neither the world nor our body has any independent existence, both are just the activity of consciousness, then we don't feel any disharmony from the problems that are going on in the world.
Right.
What we are is pure consciousness, and
Yes.
that is in total harmony. So that's another way of seeing things. But then the questioner tries to bring it down to, well, succeeds, I think, in bringing it down to a practical level. And when he's talking about that, what he's saying really is that it's the impersonal view that's that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And change comes when you see facts, because every situation has its own solution. As long as you look from a personal viewpoint, you cannot see facts. We often see judgment rather than
Yes,
facts, don't we?
yes,
I think that's really what he's saying. And if instead of choosing and willing, we just allow actions to flow from openness, from living in not knowing, then he says any action that follows is born of the harmony implicit in the unity of life, which is free from opposition or contradiction. And I
yes,
think it's a lovely recipe for living and interacting in the world. And the more
yes,
we can do that with, and the more we can present and communicate that in the way that we talk with other people, the more the waves will subside, even if only a
yes,
little bit.
yes. He gives us a formula, and he gives us a couple of suggestions on how to keep it impersonal, and he also gives us some insight into dealing with time as a basis for our involvement.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. Well, we've run out of time, Jenny. We're about 5 minutes over almost, and
Okay, right.
this has been a really great. We didn't have any interruption in our transmission. I mean, there was a little bit, but I think the experience for the audience, for our companions here, has been good. And I want to thank you for being our co-host today, and thank you everyone for being part of this book study. I look forward to many more times together, and next week we're going to have William Price for the first time as our co-host. And if I have a transmission, I'll be traveling in a motorhome. Okay, it looks like I lost you. Can you hear me, Jenny?
I can hear you, but I can't see you, Bill.
Okay. I just want to say that you are host, so you need to end the meeting for us, and I'll see you all next week. And our co-host will be William Price. And thank you all for being with us. I love you and I bless you. Namaste.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us and for participating. I'm sorry, it's I didn't manage to interact with the message board. It's quite hard to do that at the same time. But thank you anyway.